Imagine you wake up next week to discover your dollar doesn't go as far as it did yesterday. Your paycheck, your savings, your future, all under threat. We're not talking about some distant dystopia. The gears of the global financial machine are shifting right now. And for millions of Americans, it could mean a complete reset of what money means, what wealth looks like, and how you secure both. Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Jen, and today we're diving deep, narrative style, into a topic that might feel abstract, but will affect your wallet, your job, and the economy you live in: the coming financial reset. The phrase financial reset might sound dramatic, but what if it simply means the rules you grew up trusting no longer apply? What if it means we're entering a new era of money? We're part of a system rewriting itself, and your choices today determine whether you ride the wave or get swept aside. It's a strange feeling to live in a world where everything looks the same on the surface. The stores are open, the stock market's humming, and people are still buying coffee for $6. Yet underneath, something enormous is shifting. You can't see it just by glancing at your bank app or the news headlines, but if you listen closely, you can almost feel it. A quiet rearranging of the entire financial system. Economists call it the Great Reset, but for everyday Americans, it could mean something much more personal. A new era of money, wealth, and control. Let's start by tracing where this began. In the years following the pandemic, trillions of dollars flooded into the global economy. Governments borrowed and printed money like never before, not just to save people, but to keep entire systems from collapsing. The United States added over $8 trillion to its national debt in just a few years. The idea was simple: stabilize today, deal with tomorrow later. But later has arrived. Today, that same money, which once felt like a lifeline, is now the fuel for something else: inflation, debt crises, and a new debate about the very nature of money itself. The US dollar, long considered untouchable, is showing cracks under the weight of its own dominance. For decades, the dollar was more than America's currency. It was the world's. Every global transaction, every oil deal, every loan between nations, it all passed through the greenback. But now, a quiet revolution is underway. Countries like China, Russia, and even US allies are beginning to explore alternatives to the dollar. They're building new payment networks, buying record amounts of gold, and experimenting with digital currencies that bypass the traditional system entirely. This is the context for what many are calling the financial reset. It's not a single event, like a market crash or a policy announcement, but a gradual, coordinated shift. Think of it as a software update for the global economy, one that's being installed in real time. If you want to understand what this reset means for Americans, you have to start with trust, or rather, the slow erosion of it. For generations, Americans have believed that if you worked hard, saved money, and played by the rules, your financial life would be secure. But that belief is fading. Wages haven't kept up with inflation. The cost of housing has doubled in many parts of the country. Student debt weighs down millions. And now, even the safest investments, government bonds and cash, are losing purchasing power by the day. It's no surprise, then, that people are starting to ask uncomfortable questions. What happens if the dollar loses its status as the world's reserve currency? What if the next recession isn't just a cycle, but a reset? The US financial system, for all its strength, is built on layers of confidence. The confidence that dollars will always buy the same amount tomorrow as they do today. The confidence that banks will stay solvent. The confidence that credit will always be available. But each layer of that system is now under pressure. Central banks, the institutions that control global money supply, are experimenting with something called central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. On the surface, it sounds innovative. A new, efficient, digital form of money. But in practice, it could mark one of the biggest shifts in financial power in history. With a CBDC, governments wouldn't just control the supply of money. They could potentially track and control every transaction made with it. Supporters say it's about modernization and security. Critics call it programmable money. Money that can be restricted, reversed, or even frozen with the push of a button. Imagine a world where your spending limits could be adjusted by policy, where carbon budgets or social scores dictate what you can buy. It sounds dystopian, but the early groundwork is already being laid. The Federal Reserve is researching it, the European Central Bank is testing it, and China, with its digital yuan, has already rolled it out to millions. If you zoom out, you can see the bigger picture forming, a re-engineering of money itself. The system that underpinned global capitalism for 80 years, the dollar-based model, is being reimagined in real time. But resets don't happen in isolation. They're always born from crisis. And America's current financial position is full of red warning lights. The national debt has surpassed $35 trillion and is still climbing at an unsustainable rate. Servicing that debt, just paying the interest, now costs more than the US defense budget. It's like a credit card balance that's growing faster than the income used to pay it. For decades, this didn't matter much, because interest rates were near zero. Borrowing was practically free. But those days are over. When inflation surged after 2021, the Federal Reserve was forced to raise interest rates aggressively. That helped stabilize prices. But it also triggered a silent crisis. Suddenly, the cost of government debt skyrocketed, mortgage rates jumped, and corporations found it harder to borrow. The ripple effects hit everywhere. Housing markets cooled, small businesses struggled, and consumers felt squeezed. In this environment, America's economic identity is shifting. The US has moved from a production-based economy to a consumption-based one, and now to a debt-based one. For decades, Americans have been told to spend, borrow, and stimulate the economy. But that system depends on confidence and cheap money, and both are now in short supply. That's why many analysts believe the reset will come in one of two forms: a debt restructuring or a currency redefinition. Either the US restructures how it manages its massive obligations through inflation, taxation, or a digital transition, or it introduces a new form of currency to reboot trust in the system. But here's the thing: resets aren't always bad. They can also create massive opportunities. During every major monetary shift in history, new fortunes are made, not by those who resist change, but by those who understand it early. Think back to the 1970s. When the US left the gold standard, many feared the dollar would collapse. Instead, a new system of floating exchange rates emerged, and those who adapted early profited enormously. In the 1990s, when the internet began reshaping commerce, skeptics dismissed it as a fad. The few who saw its potential became the architects of modern wealth. Coming financial reset could be similar, a once-in-a-generation turning point. The question isn't whether it will happen, but how prepared you are when it does. To understand how this will affect everyday Americans, let's break it down into the realities people already feel: the cost of living, access to credit, and the future of jobs and savings. First, cost of living. Inflation has changed what it means to live comfortably in America. The median household income in 2025 is roughly $78,000. But the average cost of living for a family of four now exceeds $90,000 in most metropolitan areas. Rent, groceries, utilities. Everything is rising faster than wages. This isn't temporary, it's structural. Second, access to credit. In the old world, banks competed to lend you money. In the new one, algorithms decide your credit worthiness, and those algorithms are getting stricter. As interest rates remain high, more Americans are turning to alternative financing, from buy now, pay later apps to crypto-backed loans. The irony? We're more financially connected than ever, but also more financially vulnerable. Third, savings and investment. Traditional safe havens, cash and bonds, no longer guarantee real returns. That's pushing millions into riskier assets like stocks, real estate, and crypto. But here's the uncomfortable truth. When a financial reset comes, those markets are the first to reprice. A digital dollar rollout, for instance, could instantly reshape how assets are valued, taxed, or transferred. In the meantime, the signals are everywhere. The BRICS nations are building an alternative currency framework. US banks are quietly integrating blockchain settlement systems. Gold reserves among central banks are at their highest in 50 years. And tech giants are positioning themselves as future players in digital finance. Apple, PayPal, and even Elon Musk's X platform are building systems that could rival traditional banking. In other words, the reset isn't coming. It's already starting. And Americans stand at a crossroads. On one path, you cling to the old system, trusting that policymakers will find a way to patch it together once again. On the other, you start learning, adapting, and positioning yourself for the new one. Because when systems shift, knowledge becomes leverage. Understanding how digital currencies work, how inflation erodes wealth, and how alternative assets like gold or Bitcoin fit into a portfolio, that's the new literacy. The people who survive resets aren't the richest, they're the most informed. Let's be honest, most Americans won't see it coming. They'll wake up one day to headlines about a new digital dollar or emergency debt measures, and it'll feel sudden. But resets don't happen overnight. They're built in layers, through quiet policy changes, central bank research papers, and shifting trade agreements. For example, when the IMF talks about rethinking the global monetary order, it doesn't make the evening news, but those discussions are the seeds of tomorrow's headlines. When the Federal Reserve experiments with instant payment systems like FedNow, it's not just about convenience, it's about infrastructure for the next generation of money. If you look closely, it's clear the global economy is being rewired to be faster, more traceable, and more centralized. And that has profound implications for freedom, privacy, and personal wealth. Imagine a near-future America where all payments are digital, taxes are automatically deducted in real time, and every dollar is traceable by design. For some, that sounds efficient. For others, it sounds like control. That's the philosophical question at the heart of the reset. Will the future of money empower individuals or systems? So what can Americans actually do to prepare? The first step is awareness. Understand that money isn't static, it's a living system. The dollars in your account are only as strong as the trust backing them. The second is diversification. Don't rely on one system or one asset class. History shows that in times of monetary transition, those who held a mix of hard assets, digital assets, and skills, not just cash, came out strongest. The third is adaptability. The reset isn't just about money, it's about mindset. The people who thrive will be the ones who understand how to operate in both worlds, the traditional financial system and the new digital one. The coming financial reset isn't just a story about banks or policy, it's a story about us. About how we navigate a world where money, trust, and power are all being redefined. The truth is, America has reinvented itself before. From the Great Depression to the dot-com boom, every collapse has eventually led to renewal. This reset will be no different. But it will demand something new from all of us. Clarity, courage, and a willingness to evolve. Because in the end, financial resets don't just change economies, they change people. And the question every American will have to ask is, when the next system begins, will you be caught off guard, or already ahead of it? When you look at today's headlines, it's easy to feel like everything is normal. The Dow hits another high. Inflation moderates. The unemployment rate holds steady. Politicians say the economy is strong. But under those carefully chosen words lies a reality that's changing faster than most Americans realize. The financial reset isn't a theory anymore. It's happening in slow motion, right in front of us. And if you know what to look for, the signs are impossible to ignore. For nearly 80 years, the US dollar has been the undisputed king of global trade. Every major oil transaction, every major reserve holding, every central bank portfolio, all built around the dollar. But over the last 24 months, something historic has begun. Nations are actively building systems to bypass it. In 2025, the BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, expanded, adding nations like Saudi Arabia and Iran. Together, they now represent more than 45% of global oil production. And they're developing a new payment settlement system, possibly backed by commodities or a shared digital currency, to trade without using the dollar. That might sound distant from American life, but the consequences aren't. The dollar's global dominance has long allowed the US to borrow cheaply and spend freely. If that advantage fades, the cost of everything, from imports to debt interest, will rise. It's already happening subtly. Countries are diversifying their reserves, buying less US debt and more gold. In fact, global central banks bought a record 1,100 tons of gold last year, the highest in modern history. They're hedging against the dollar, and that means the reset isn't a future event. It's underway in the vaults of nations right now. Every American should know this number. $35 trillion. That's the US national debt as of late 2025. And what's more alarming than the size of it is the speed of its growth. The US government is now adding over $1 trillion in new debt every 100 days. To put it in perspective, that's like adding an entire mini-COVID bailout every 3 months, without any crisis. And the interest payments alone are now over $1.2 trillion per year, more than the US spends on defense. This is where the conversation turns darkly practical. When interest becomes your biggest expense, you're no longer managing a budget, you're managing survival. The US Treasury has already begun issuing record volumes of short-term debt just to keep the government running. It's like refinancing your mortgage every few months, hoping rates stay low. But rates aren't low anymore. This is why economists are warning that the next financial shock won't come from Wall Street, it'll come from Washington. A loss of confidence in US debt would ripple through every aspect of life. Mortgage rates, credit cards, even the value of your savings account. That's the real meaning of a reset, when the old math stops working. Few headlines sound more technical than Fed expands digital currency research. But in truth, it's one of the most consequential developments of our time. The Federal Reserve is now testing the architecture for a US central bank digital currency, CBDC. It's not fiction anymore. It's happening quietly, through pilot programs with commercial banks, fintech firms, and even global institutions. The official pitch is faster, safer, more efficient payments. But the implications go far beyond convenience. A digital dollar would mean every unit of currency could be programmable, trackable, traceable, and potentially controllable. Imagine a world where your stimulus check, your tax refund, or your loan forgiveness isn't just deposited into your account. It's coded to be spent in certain categories or within a specific time frame. Imagine a future where cash, real, anonymous, physical cash, simply ceases to exist. That's not speculation, it's policy language from central banks worldwide. The Fed's FedNow system, launched in 2023 as an instant payments network, was step 1. A digital dollar, step 2, could integrate directly into it. The Bank for International Settlements, BIS, which coordinates global central banks, already calls this the new monetary infrastructure. And here's what most Americans don't realize. Once implemented, a CBDC could give governments unprecedented power over spending behavior. Programmable money means money that can expire, be restricted, or be flagged. That's efficient in theory, but terrifying in practice. In the context of the coming reset, a CBDC isn't just about modernization. It's the foundation of a new kind of financial governance, one that could reshape personal freedom itself. The average American household today is facing a harsh reality. The top 10% of Americans now hold nearly 70% of all US wealth. And that gap is widening faster every year. Part of this is structural, asset inflation. As the Fed printed money during the pandemic, it flowed primarily into stocks, real estate, and private equity. Those who owned assets saw their wealth surge. Those who didn't fell further behind. But there's something new happening. The cost of being middle class has exploded. In 1990, the average family needed the equivalent of $48,000, adjusted for inflation, to live comfortably. In 2025, that number has soared to $93,000, nearly double. And yet, the median household income hasn't kept pace. Even with low unemployment, many Americans feel poorer. Why? Because inflation in the essentials, housing, food, healthcare, education, outpaces wage growth. The result is psychological as much as financial. Americans are working harder, earning more in dollar terms, but buying less in life terms. The comfortable life, home ownership, savings, vacations, stability, is becoming a luxury product. This widening gap is exactly what accelerates financial resets. When too many people can't sustain the system changes. Here's a story most people missed. In 2025, BlackRock and JP Morgan began tokenizing real-world assets, from US Treasury bonds to real estate, using blockchain technology. That means the future of finance is no longer just about dollars in bank accounts. It's about digital representations of value, tokenized stocks, tokenized bonds, Tokenized commodities. In simple terms, it's money and assets living natively on the internet. Why does that matter for Americans? Because it represents a complete rewiring of how wealth is held and transferred. A tokenized financial world is faster, but also more centralized. Everything is on-chain, visible, and theoretically controllable. The old saying, "not your keys, not your coins," might soon apply not just to crypto, but to everything from your mortgage to your pension fund. That's the new reality. Wall Street is moving to the blockchain, not to decentralize, but to streamline control. When inflation first spiked in 2021, policymakers called it transitory. By 2025, that word has all but disappeared. Even though official inflation rates have cooled to around 3%, real inflation, the stuff that matters, hasn't. Housing is up 40% since 2020. Healthcare premiums have jumped another 25%. Groceries? Up 30%. And because inflation compounds, every dollar you save today buys less tomorrow. This is why inflation is often called the invisible tax. It quietly transfers wealth from savers to borrowers, from workers to asset owners. The cruel irony is that the same government policies designed to fight inflation, higher interest rates, have made housing and borrowing even more expensive. The system is eating itself from both ends. The result? For many Americans, the dream of financial independence feels like it's slipping away. Not because they're doing anything wrong, but because the rules of the game are changing mid-play. AI isn't just transforming tech companies. It's transforming everything. In 2025, industries from finance to logistics to law are automating faster than expected. Goldman Sachs estimates that 300 million jobs globally could be affected by AI-driven automation in the coming decade. That doesn't mean mass unemployment, but it does mean mass restructuring. The jobs being created require higher skills, while the jobs being replaced are often middle income. The danger is clear: a hollowed-out middle class and an even wider wealth gap. Here's the connection to the financial reset. AI and automation accelerate the shift toward digital economies, programmable labor, digital currency, tokenized pay. It's all part of the same transformation. For Americans, that means the most valuable asset in the coming decade won't be money. It'll be adaptability. Another quiet transformation is happening in housing. In many cities, large investment firms are buying up single-family homes, not to flip, but to rent. That's creating a two-tiered system, one where ownership is increasingly concentrated in institutional hands, and the other where the average family rents indefinitely. In places like Phoenix, Tampa, and Dallas, private equity firms now own up to 20% of available homes. They're effectively turning neighborhoods into investment portfolios. This isn't just a housing story, it's a wealth story. Homeownership has been the cornerstone of middle-class security in America for generations. As that becomes less attainable, the ladder of mobility begins to break. If there's one thing holding this entire system together, it's trust. Trust in banks, trust in the dollar, trust in government. Trust that your savings will still mean something in 10 years. But recent polls show that only 20% of Americans trust the federal government to do what's right most of the time. Confidence in banks has fallen to its lowest level since 2008, and even younger generations are turning to decentralized alternatives: crypto, gold, peer-to-peer finance, not out of greed, but out of fear. That's what a financial reset really is. Not just numbers changing in ledgers, but a psychological shift in what people believe. And once that belief breaks, the world has to rebuild around a new one. For Americans, the challenge is clear. You can't stop the reset, but you can prepare for it. By staying informed, by diversifying intelligently, by understanding the systems that shape your money before they change beyond recognition. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I really appreciate you watching. If you found this useful, a like would be fantastic, and subscribing helps me keep creating content you'll hopefully enjoy. Please share your experiences and any questions in the comments. I always try to read and respond. Your support keeps this channel going. Until our next video, take care and have a wonderful day.